The slap never came, but the humiliation landed just as hard. "Sir, you need to vacate the seat immediately." The voice cut to the polished air of first class like a blade, slicing to the low hum of conversation, the clink of crystal glasses, the rustle of magazines. It was cold, sharp, rehearsed, the kind of voice that brooked no argument. Jordan Ellis looked up slowly from seat 2A, his expression composed but unreadable. The warm cabin lights reflected off the silver rims of his glasses, but beneath their calm sheen his chest tightened. Dozens of eyes swiveled toward him, some curious, some skeptical, and more than a few tinged with quiet amusement. The attendant stood rigid in the aisle. She was tall, immaculate, with a perfect navy uniform, hair pinned so tightly it seemed it might snap. But her eyes carried no warmth. Behind her loomed 2 uniformed security officers, their hands hovering just a little too close to their tasers. Jordan's hand rested lightly on the leather handle of his briefcase, the same case that carried a presentation worth more than the combined salaries of half the people on this plane. The deal of his career, his lifeline, his weapon, his proof. But none of them knew that. To them, he was just another black man who didn't fit in seat 2A. Phones lifted into the air like weapons. Screens glowed red, with recording lights. A woman in a purple scarf leaned into the aisle, whispering, "Are they really doing this?" Another passenger further back muttered, "Don't get involved," even as his phone tilted higher. The silence of first class had transformed. It wasn't silence anymore, it was judgment. The kind of silence that weighed on shoulders, that painted the accused guilty before he spoke a word. Jordan knew the silence well. He had lived in it his whole life. The attendant leaned forward, her voice dropping into something brittle. "This seat is reserved for a VIP guest of the airline. You may move to economy. You'll be compensated with a voucher." Her smile was sharp, not kind. Jordan's pulse thudded once, hard, but outwardly he was still, his breath measured. Slowly, he placed his e-ticket on the tray table in front of him, its glossy paper a silent declaration. "This seat is mine. Booked 3 weeks ago. Fully confirmed," he said, his voice low but steady, carrying across the cabin like a subtle challenge. The officer nearest to him shifted, boots squeaking against the carpet. He was already leaning into the role of enforcer, already convinced of what he saw, a man out of place. Jordan could feel the weight of passengers' stares pressing against his skin. Some were sympathetic, their brows knitted in discomfort. Others wore thin smirks, relieved it wasn't them in the spotlight. And a few, always a few, looked entertained, sipping champagne as if watching a performance staged for their amusement. Across the aisle, a heavy-set white businessman cleared his throat, coughed once, and returned to sipping his drink. His body language screamed permission, as if the removal of Jordan was routine, expected, even natural. The attendant's smile grew thinner. "Sir, if you don't comply, we'll have to escort you out." Her voice was calm, but her eyes glinted with satisfaction. She wanted him to resist. She wanted him to make a scene. Jordan didn't move. His mother's voice rang in his head, as clear as if she was sitting beside him. "They will try to erase you, Jordan. Don't let them. You must show them you exist." He drew a breath, deep, slow, steady. "This seat I paid for," he said again. "I'm not going anywhere." The air froze. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, some lowering their eyes to their screens, pretending not to watch. Others leaned closer, breath caught in their throats. A young woman discreetly raised her phone higher, framing Jordan perfectly against the rigid line of the attendant's body. The lead officer stepped forward, his shadow spilling across Jordan's lap. "Sir, last chance. You can either move to the back of the plane voluntarily, or we will remove you." His hand hovered an inch from his holster, a silent threat glowing brighter than words. Jordan's jaw tightened, though only for a second. His heart was pounding, not from fear, but from fury. Fury for himself, but also for every traveler who had ever been told they didn't belong. For every black man shoved out of space he'd earned. He thought of his guidance counselor at 17, sneering, "College isn't for you. Plumbing is more stable." He thought of the banker at 25, flipping through his flawless business plan before rejecting him with the words, "You don't fit the image we want." He thought of the Harvard Business Club at 30, classmates whispering behind his back. He probably got in because of affirmative action. Each insult stacked like bricks inside his chest. Each humiliation had built a steel that now ran through his voice. Passengers whispered, "Why aren't they letting him stay?" "He has a ticket." "Shoo, don't say anything, you'll get in trouble." Phones kept recording. The courtroom had formed, and Jordan was the accused standing trial without defense. The attendant's brittle smile snapped. She motioned to the officers. "Escort him out." The officer's hand closed around Jordan's shoulder, not rough, but firm enough to send a message. Gasps filled the cabin. Someone muttered, "That's not right." Another voice whispered, "He hasn't done anything." Jordan remained still. He could have fought. He could have shouted, argued, demanded justice then and there. But he knew better. His silence was louder than rage. His composure was a weapon. So he rose slowly, deliberately, his hand tightening on the handle of his leather briefcase. Every step down the aisle felt like iron shackles dragging him away from dignity, away from the seat he had rightfully paid for. Passengers parted like water, some averting their eyes, others holding their phones higher, capturing the quiet violence of humiliation. "Probably a fake ticket," someone whispered. "Always causing trouble," another muttered. Jordan heard it all. He always did. By the time they reached the back, the contrast was suffocating. From champagne glasses and silk cushions to flimsy plastic cups and cramped middle seats. Economy was loud, tight, suffused with the smell of reheated meals. The man in the aisle seat scowled, shifting grudgingly to let Jordan squeeze past. The woman by the window pressed herself against the wall, as if shrinking away from contamination. Jordan sat, his knees pressed into the seat in front. The overhead light buzzed faintly. His silk tie felt like a noose against his throat. A flight attendant dropped a half-filled plastic cup of water on his tray table, liquid sloshing over the rim. No apology, no acknowledgement. Jordan wiped the spill with a napkin. His hand was steady, but inside, a fire raged. He glanced at his phone. Notifications flooded in. The clip of him being removed from first class had already begun spreading online. Dozens of retweets. Outraged comments piling up. The humiliation had escaped the cabin. It was now a spark spreading to the digital world. Jordan leaned back, loosening his tie. His chest still burned, but beneath the fury was something sharper. Resolve. They thought they had won by forcing him out of seat 2A. But Jordan Ellis knew the truth. This was no defeat. This was the opening act. And when he struck back, the cost wouldn't be a seat. It would be $50 million. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to support the channel. The economy seat pressed against Jordan Ellis like a punishment. His knees jammed hard against the tray table in front of him. The armrest cut into his side. The smell of reheated pasta drifted through the aisle, mixing with a faint tang of stale coffee and cheap cologne. Every sound, the chatter, the shuffling, the coughing, seemed designed to remind him that this was not where he belonged. Not after the price he had paid. Not after the path he had carved. Not after everything he had built. The fall from first class to economy wasn't measured in rows. It was measured in dignity. The man in the aisle seat beside him gave a sideways glance, his face pinched, expression unfriendly. He shifted slightly, creating a few inches of space as though the very presence of Jordan in a tailored suit was an intrusion. The woman at the window pressed herself closer to the plastic wall, pretending to scroll her phone, but sneaking glances as though proximity itself was contamination. Jordan said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence could be armor, but his silence was cracking inside. A half-filled plastic cup landed hard on his tray with a splash. Water spilled over the rim, droplets sliding toward his briefcase. The attendant didn't look at him, didn't offer a napkin, didn't offer a word. Just walked away with the same indifference as someone discarding trash. Jordan dabbed at the spill with slow, deliberate movements. His face betrayed nothing, but his chest felt heavy, like molten iron filling his lungs, because he knew this wasn't about a seat. It never was. It was about being reminded, again and again, that in some people's eyes, he would never belong, no matter how hard he worked, no matter what he achieved. A whisper floated from the row ahead. I heard his ticket was fake. Another voice answered. Figures. Always trying to sneak into places. Jordan closed his eyes, breathing slow, steady. He could still hear his mother's voice from the South Chicago projects. Don't let them erase you, Jordan. They'll try to push you out of the picture, but you show them you belong in it. He had carried those words through every closed door, every doubting look, every rejection. But here, at 35,000 feet, the weight of them threatened to break him. His phone buzzed. A notification popped up. Passenger forced out of first class. Skirich Airlines accused of discrimination. Hashtag justice for Jordan. He blinked, jaw tightening. The clip had already gone live. A shaky video recorded by a young woman 2 rows back. It showed the attendant's rigid smile, the officer's looming shadow, and Jordan himself rising slowly with his briefcase, silent but dignified. Within 20 minutes, it had been retweeted over 1,000 times. The caption read, "They threw him out of his seat to make room for a VIP. He paid. He had proof. But they didn't care. Hashtag flying while black." Jordan stared at the screen. His reflection glared back faintly in the glass. For years, he had fought to control the narrative, to prove his worth in boardrooms, to fight prejudice with performance. But here, the narrative had slipped beyond his hands. And perhaps that was the point. The man beside him snorted softly, leaning close enough that only Jordan could hear. "You should have just moved. Some fights aren't worth it." Jordan turned his head, his expression calm but his voice low and sharp. "Every fight is worth it when your dignity's on the line." The man said nothing more, but Jordan's words hung in the air like smoke. Another notification buzzed. Then another, and another. Trending worldwide. Hashtag justice for Jordan. Clip hits 500,000 views in under an hour. Comment. This is exactly what people mean by systemic bias. He didn't even raise his voice, and they still treated him like a criminal. Jordan's chest ached with a mix of shame and something sharper, vindication. He had wanted to disappear into silence, but silence was no longer an option. The world had seen. He thought of the banker at 25 who told him he didn't fit the image. That rejection had left him sleeping in his rental car, staring up at a cracked motel ceiling, wondering if he would ever climb out of the box the world forced him into. He thought of his Harvard classmates, the ones who smirked when he spoke in seminars, whispering that his admission was nothing but tokenism. He thought of the first deal he lost because a partner muttered behind closed doors, "He doesn't look like the type to lead." Each memory pressed down like a weight. Each scar whispered the same lie. You don't belong. But Jordan knew better. He had fought through every storm. He had built Summit Capital from the ground up. He had prepared a deal worth $120 million to rescue Skirich Airlines itself. And the irony burned like fire. The very airline that needed him was the one humiliating him before the world. A voice broke his reverie. "Hey!" Jordan looked up. It was a man across the aisle, a stocky traveler in his late 40s, with tired eyes but a kind face. He leaned closer. "I filmed it too, when they made you leave. If you need it, I'll send it." Jordan's throat tightened for a moment, but his voice came out steady. "Thank you. That means more than you know." The man nodded, tapping his phone, and a second clip landed in Jordan's inbox. He forwarded it immediately to his COO. Subject line, evidence. Piece by piece, the case was building. Not just a personal defense, but a weapon. Across the cabin, whispers swirl like currents. This is going viral. I saw it on Twitter already. Skirich is finished if this is real. Jordan leaned back, the cramped seat cutting into his spine, but his posture straightened. His humiliation was no longer confined to this aluminum tube hurtling through the sky. It had spilled outward, transforming into a storm. And storms, Jordan knew, could level empires. His phone buzzed again. A message from Tiana Brooks, his COO. "Jordan, are you okay? The video is everywhere. Media already calling. What do you want us to do?" He typed slowly, each word deliberate. "Hold the transfer. Freeze the $25 million. Prepare boardroom for escalation. This isn't over. He set the phone down on the tray. His reflection glinted faintly in the darkened screen, eyes sharp, jaw set. They had forced him out of first class, but they had also given him something more powerful than any seat. Undeniable evidence. Jordan Ellis wasn't just a humiliated passenger. He was a CEO with capital, a strategist with proof, and now a symbol carried on millions of screens. The humiliation still burned like acid. The cramped seat still pressed into his legs. The plastic cup still sweated faintly on his tray. But under it all, a thought rose, cold and sharp. This is no longer about me. This is about every door slammed, every voice silenced, every person told they didn't belong. They turned my seat into a weapon, and now I'll turn it into their downfall. Jordan closed his eyes, the roar of the engines thrumming like war drums in his chest. The battle had only just begun. By the second hour of the flight, Jordan Ellis was no longer just a man in seat 34B. He was a headline. He was a trending tag. He was the center of a storm Skirich Airlines couldn't control. Phones glowed like constellations across the cabin. Passengers who had ignored him earlier now leaned forward, whispering, reading updates, scrolling through feeds that carried his image. Calm, dignified, briefcase in hand, being escorted out of first class. The caption on one viral clip read, "He paid for first class. They forced him out anyway. Hashtag flying while black." Another had looped the moment he placed his ticket firmly on the tray table, his voice steady. "This seat is mine. Booked 3 weeks ago. Viewed 1.2 million times." Jordan sat still, his hands folded on his lap, watching the chaos unfold through the glass of his phone screen. It was surreal, like looking into a mirror that had multiplied into millions of fragments, each replaying his humiliation on loop. A notification buzzed. CNN breaking news. Passenger forcibly removed from Skirich first class in suspected case of racial bias. The headline punched through him, but he kept his face composed. In his chest, anger simmered, but above it was something colder, strategy. Across the aisle, whispers grew louder. "That's him. The guy in the video. Unbelievable. Look at how calm he was." A young woman in a yellow blazer, the same one who had filmed earlier, angled her phone slightly so Jordan could see her live stream. Comments poured in, streaming up the screen faster than her eyes could follow. This is discrimination, plain and simple. Skirich should be ashamed. Who is this guy? He carries himself like a CEO, not just some random passenger. The young woman caught Jordan's gaze and gave a small nod. Quiet solidarity, but fierce, unshaken. In first class, the mood was different. Preston Hale, the so-called VIP whose demand for seat 2A had sparked the ordeal, reclined smugly, his champagne flute catching the cabin lights. He laughed too loudly, made a show of clinking his glass with the airline's vice president of operations, Graham Lockwood, who sat stiffly beside him. "See," Preston said, his voice dripping with arrogance, loud enough for the nearby rows to hear. "Clean seat. That's how it should be. Can't have people like him dirtying it." Phones in the first 2 rows tilted instantly, catching the words. A woman gasped audibly. Graham shifted uncomfortably, his smile brittle. He sipped his drink but glanced at Preston with a look that betrayed unease. He knew the cameras were watching now. He knew this wasn't contained. Back in economy, Jordan typed into his phone. Note 1. Ticket scan confirmed. Attendant ignored evidence. Note 2. Water served in half-filled cup. Contrast with service in first class. Note 3. Luggage rerouted. Suspected retaliation. Every line was a blade, sharpened for later. The young man in front of him swiveled in his seat, holding up his phone nervously. "Mr. Sir," his voice cracked slightly. "I caught the whole thing. When they told you to move, when the officer grabbed your shoulder. I posted it already. It's got like 200K views." Jordan looked at him, a flicker of warmth breaking through the steel of his gaze. "Send it to me?" The boy nodded quickly, fingers fly across the screen. Moments later, another piece of evidence landed in Jordan's inbox. Piece by piece, strangers were handing him weapons. His phone buzzed again. A message from his COO, Tiana Brooks. "Jordan, It's everywhere. CNBC, BBC, Al Jazeera. Even Bloomberg is covering it. What's the move? Jordan typed back one line. Hold. Don't blink. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and leaned into the headrest, his mind drifting for just a moment. He remembered being 18, sitting in the cramped office of his high school guidance counselor. The man had leaned back in his chair, eyes flat, voice dismissive. College isn't for you, Jordan. Think about trade school. Plumbing is stable. Jordan remembered the rage, the shame, the way it clenched his fist beneath the desk. He never argued. He just went home, studied harder, aced his SATs, and walked into Harvard Business School 3 years later. He remembered standing in a bank lobby at 25, holding a business plan thicker than a phone book. The loan officer barely looked at it before saying, "We don't think you fit the image we want to support." Jordan had left with frozen hands, sleeping in his rental car that night, promising himself, never again. Now at 43, sitting in the middle seat of economy with his knees jammed into plastic, the echoes of those moments returned, each one a scar, each one a reminder. And now, once again, the system had tried to push him out. But this time, he wasn't the only witness. The world was watching. The cabin had changed. It wasn't just a plane anymore. It was a courtroom. The passengers were jurors. The crew, already on trial. The whispers were no longer just gossip. They were evidence being cataloged by hundreds of lenses. A woman 2 rows back spoke up, trembling but loud enough for others to hear. "I saw his ticket scan green." They lied. The attendant in economy snapped her head around, eyes narrowing. "Ma'am, please stay quiet." But it was too late. Others had heard. Another passenger called out, voice firm. He didn't do anything wrong. They just wanted him out. More phones tilted upward, catching exchange. The murmurs grew louder, more insistent. The balance was shifting. Jordan remained silent, his hands folded, his gaze steady on the seat back in front of him. He didn't need to argue. He didn't need to plead. Every moment the crew mishandled this. They dug themselves deeper. And silence, his silence, was the most powerful evidence of all. Up in first class, Graham Lockwood shifted again, his phone buzzing incessantly with messages from PR. His temples beaded with sweat, though he tried to mask it with a stiff smile. Preston, oblivious, leaned back and laughed again, muttering about keeping first class clean. But Graham knew. The ground beneath him was shaking. And Jordan knew it too. Jordan opened his phone one more time. He tapped a secure line only a handful of people had access to. The call connected instantly. A calm female voice answered. "Mr. Ellis." "Protocol?" Jordan's reply was measured, his voice low, carrying the weight of restrained fire. "Stand by. Freeze the installment. Notify legal. Flag every minute of this flight." "Yes, sir," the voice replied. Jordan ended the call, slid the phone back into his pocket, and exhaled. He leaned back in cramped seat, his face calm, his posture steady, but his mind was already 10 steps ahead. They had turned this cabin into a stage. They had written him into the role of victim. But they didn't realize he was rewriting the ending in real time. And when the curtain fell, it wouldn't just be about one stolen seat. It would be about the price of humiliation. And Skerich Airlines was about to learn that price could be $50 million. The plane's wheels screeched against the runway, but Jordan Ellis didn't move. Passengers surged for the overhead bins, clattering luggage wheels, slamming zippers, muttering about connections. But Jordan sat perfectly still, knees pressed against the hard plastic of row 34, hands folded on his leather briefcase. The ding of the seatbelt sign meant nothing. He knew the real turbulence was only beginning. In first class, the announcement was made as if nothing had happened. Passengers in rows 1 through May 4th disembarked first. Preston Hale rose immediately, adjusting his pinstripe suit with a smirk. Graham Lockwood followed, pale but trying to look composed, his phone buzzing relentlessly in his pocket. They disappeared into the jet bridge as though humiliation and scandal hadn't trailed them down the aisle. Jordan watched them go with a calm that belied the storm in his chest. Let them walk first. But when these doors open, I'll be the one in control. The arrivals hall was chaos. Cameras flashed. Travelers paused mid-step. A ripple moved through the crowd. Whispers, pointing fingers, lifted phones. That's him. The man they threw out of first class. Oh my God, he's trending. A young man snapped a picture, uploading it instantly with a caption. He's here. The black CEO forced out of first class. Hashtag Justice for Jordan. Within minutes, the image spread across feeds worldwide. Outside, a black sedan waited at the curb, sleek and understated, its tinted windows glinting under airport lights. The driver, suited and professional, stepped forward with a bow. Mr. Ellis, he said softly, the CEO of Skirich has sent a car for you. Gasps rippled from a nearby crowd. Phones shot up again. CEO? Investor? Wait, he owns part of this airline. In that instant, the narrative shifted. He wasn't just a passenger anymore. He was a man of consequence. Jordan stepped into the sedan, closing the door with deliberate calm. Inside, silence pressed like velvet, broken only by the purr of the engine. His reflection in the tinted glass was composed, but his eyes gleamed like steel. The Skirich headquarters towered over the city, like a monument of glass and steel. 38 floors shimmering in the evening sun. When Jordan entered, 2 security guards blocked his path. Who are you here to see? One asked, voice flat, eyes cold. Jordan handed him a card. Jordan Ellis. I have a meeting with CEO Arthur Beaumont at 2 p.m. The guard glanced at the card, then at Jordan. Skepticism etched into every line of his face. Wait here. Need to verify. Jordan didn't flinch. He stood tall, leather case in hand, posture unyielding. He had seen this look 1,000 times before. Guards at hotels, receptionists at banks, managers in lobbies. Each one silently asking, do you belong here? 1 minute passed. 2, 3. Employees filtered by, whispering as they recognized him from the viral clips. Phones discreetly tilted toward him. Then the elevator doors slid open. Arthur Beaumont, the weary silver-haired CEO of Skirich, stepped out. He froze when his eyes landed on Jordan, recognition flooding his face. Mr. Ellis. Arthur stammered, his voice almost breaking. I sincerely apologize. This was a terrible mistake. He rushed forward, hand extended. Jordan clasped it, but his eyes were blades. His voice was low, steady. You call that a mistake? Look at the videos flooding the internet. Look at what your airline did in front of the world. Arthur paled, turning sharply toward the guards. Let him in immediately. This is a guest of the board. The guards stepped back, chastened, their arrogance evaporating. The boardroom on the 38th floor glowed with harsh afternoon light pouring through glass walls. A long table stretched across the room, lined with the faces of Skirich's top brass. Every chair was filled. The air was heavy with tension, the kind that clings before verdict. When Jordan entered, chairs scraped against the floor. No one met his eyes, except Graham Lockwood, whose thin smile trembled at the corners. Mr. Ellis, Graham said smoothly, voice strained but feigning control. What a surprise. We were just discussing. Jordan cut him off. He set his leather case on the table with a sharp thud that echoed through the room. Not a surprise, he said, voice even. A reckoning. He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. A video played. Passenger footage showing the moment he was ordered out of his seat, the officer's shadow looming. Preston's sneer captured crystal clear. Murmurs rippled through the board. Some directors shifted in their chairs. Others paled visibly. Jordan's voice cut through the noise. You invited me here to finalize a $120 million restructuring deal. But I don't invest in humiliation. I don't invest in prejudice. And I don't invest in companies that bury their rot under glossy uniforms. He let the silence hang for a moment, then continued. Sharper. Effective immediately, Summit Capital is freezing $25 million already transferred. Unless action is taken, the remaining $95 million will never arrive, and Skirich will collapse under the weight of its own arrogance. Arthur's jaw dropped, his voice trembling. Mr. Ellis, please, we can resolve this. Surely you don't want. Jordan raised a hand, silencing him. This isn't about what I want. This is about accountability. If you think this is just about one seat, you've missed a point. That cabin was a courtroom, and the jury has already delivered its verdict. The world saw your airline for what it is. Evidence piled onto the table. Jordan opened his case and spread documents across the polished wood. Buried complaints from employees, each one citing discrimination under Graham's leadership. Settlement records from passengers quietly paid off after similar incidents. A fresh testimony from Jenna Patel, a flight attendant who had already messaged Jordan that morning, confirming Graham's direct order. I don't care what his ticket says. That seat belongs to Preston. Each page landed like a hammer. The board members looked down at the documents as though they were radioactive. Arthur slumped his chair, sweat shining on his temples. Graham's smile vanished, replaced by the pale mask of a man caught in his own trap. Jordan stood tall at the head of the table, his presence filling the room. You thought forcing me out of seat 2, it would humiliate me. Instead, you humiliated yourselves in front of your passengers, in front of your employees, in front of the entire world. He swept his gaze across the board, each face shrinking under the weight of his words. You asked me to save Skirich. Now I'll decide whether Skirich is worth saving at all. Silence crashed over the room, thick and suffocating. For a moment, no one dared move. Then Jordan gathered his documents, slid them neatly back into his case, and clicked it shut. My terms will be clear, he said quietly, but his words carried like thunder. Remove Graham Lockwood. Reform your policies from the ground up. Establish independent oversight. Until then, not a single dollar leaves Summit Capital. He turned and walked out without another glance. The heavy doors closed behind him, leaving the boardroom in stunned silence. In the descending elevator, Jordan stared at his reflection in the mirrored walls. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with fire. They had forced him from a seat. Now he was forcing them to the edge of collapse. This was no longer about one flight, one humiliation, or one man. This was about a system that had written him out for years. And today, he was writing himself back in, with ink they couldn't erase. The city skyline shimmered in the evening haze, but for Skirich Airlines, twilight had already fallen. By dawn, the headlines were brutal. Skirich stock plummets after discrimination scandal. Passenger humiliated in first class, identified as major investor. Summit Capital freezes $25 million, threatens to withdraw entire deal. The company had lost $700 million in market value in less than 24 hours. And Jordan Ellis hadn't raised his voice once. Inside his hotel suite, Jordan sat at the head of a makeshift war room. Laptops glowed across the long table, each screen displaying a different angle of the viral clips. His team worked in silence, their faces tense but focused. Naomi Park, head of internal investigations, dropped another file onto the desk. 7 former employees, all willing to testify about Lockwood's history, patterns of bias, intimidation, and cover-ups. Victor and Gwynn, legal counsel, leaned forward. With this, we have grounds for a class action suit. But honestly, public opinion is already the strongest courtroom. They're finished. Jordan nodded slowly, sipping water from a glass far sturdier than the flimsy cup economy had offered him. His eyes never left the screens. Not yet, he said softly. They're not finished until I say they're finished. Across town, Skirich's boardroom was drowning in panic. Directors argued, voices sharp, faces pale. This scandal is costing us millions every hour. Clients are canceling contracts left and right. We can't survive without Summit Capital. At the far end of the table, Graham Lockwood sat rigid, jaw clenched. His suit was perfect, but his composure was unraveling. This is Ellis's play. Graham spat. He staged all of it. He's manufacturing outrage to seize control of Skirich. Margaret Doyle, a senior board member with decades of scars in corporate battles, fixed him with a cold glare. Manufactured? Graham. There are over a dozen videos. Passenger testimony. Your voice on record. If this is a plot, you wrote half of it yourself. Arthur Beaumont, the CEO, slumped forward, gray with fatigue. We're bleeding out. Unless we make a move, Ellis will kill the deal and leave us bankrupt. The room fell silent at his words. And then, as if summoned by fate, the doors opened. Jordan Ellis walked in. He didn't wait for an invitation. He didn't smile. He simply set his leather briefcase on the polished wood table and looked each director in the eye. "You want to survive?" His voice was calm, low, but every syllable carried weight. "Then listen carefully. I didn't come here to negotiate. I came here to deliver terms." He tapped the screen of his phone. A new video played. Jenna Patel's secret recording. Graham's voice filled the boardroom, cold and unmistakable. "I don't care what his ticket says. That seat belongs to Preston. Make trouble if you have to. Just get him out of there." The words dropped like a guillotine. Some directors gasped aloud. One covered her mouth. Arthur's face drained of all color. And Jordan didn't stop there. He swiped again, playing the second recording, Graham threatening Jenna. "If you open your mouth, your career is over." The silence that followed was suffocating. No one could look at Graham now. Jordan leaned forward, his gaze locked on the man who had orchestrated his humiliation. "You didn't just strip me from a seat, Graham. You stripped this airline of its last chance at survival." He straightened, turning his attention to the board. Effective immediately, Summit Capital is withdrawing an additional $50 million from the restructuring deal. That's liquidity you will never see again. The words echoed in the chamber like a verdict. Arthur shot up from his chair, desperation in his voice. "Mr. Ellis, please. This will bankrupt us. The stock is already collapsing. If you pull out now, Skerritt won't survive the week." Jordan's reply was ice. "Then maybe Skerritt shouldn't survive." Graham slammed a fist on the table. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't walk away from a $120 million deal just because of some—" Jordan cut him off with a glare sharp enough to slice glass. "Bluffing?" His voice rose slightly for first time, controlled but resonant. "You tore up my ticket in front of witnesses. You shoved me into economy like I didn't exist. You mocked me in front of your passengers. And then you called me an animal in a plane I was prepared to save. That wasn't a business transaction, Graham. That was war. And I don't bluff in war." The boardroom froze. Jordan exhaled slowly, regaining his composure. "Here are my terms. Remove Graham Lockwood immediately. Establish an independent oversight committee against discrimination. Publicly apologize, not with a press release, but with real reform. Otherwise, I walk. And when I walk, so do your investors, your partners, and your future." The directors exchanged frantic looks. Margaret Doyle was the first to speak, her voice like steel. "I move that Graham Lockwood be terminated effective immediately." Hands rose around the table, one after another, a tidal wave of agreement. The result was unanimous. Graham's face twisted, a mix of rage and disbelief. "You're all cowards. You'll regret this. He's playing you." But no one answered. His power had evaporated. Guard stepped in, escorted him out as his voice cracked into a roar. The door slammed shut, leaving silence in its wake. Arthur slumped back, defeated. "Mr. Ellis, we accept your terms. Please give us a chance to survive." Jordan gathered his briefcase and rose to his full height. His voice was calm, but final. "This isn't about survival. It's about respect. You treated me like I didn't belong in first class. But remember this, without me, Skerritt doesn't belong in the skies." He turned and walked out, the heavy doors closing behind him like the final stroke of a gavel. Outside, the city pulsed with life, headlights streaking like veins of light through the dusk. Jordan paused by the tall windows, looking out over the skyline. He thought of his mother, walking him to school in the rain, whispering, "Don't let them erase you." He thought of the banker who told him no, the classmates who doubted him, the officer who hovered too close to his taser. Every insult, every rejection, every humiliation had brought him to this moment. They had stripped him of a seat. He had stripped him of $50 million. And in the balance, dignity had finally been restored. By midnight, the world knew. Breaking. Skerritt VP fired after viral scandal. Investor Jordan Ellis pulls $50 million, demands reform. Social media erupted. The hashtag Justice for Jordan hit 50 million mentions. Clips of Jordan's calm defiance flooded every platform, a symbol larger than the man himself. And in the quiet of the suite, Jordan Ellis sat alone, staring out at the glowing city below. His reflection in the glass was steady, composed, unshaken. They had tried to erase him from seat 2A. Instead, he had written himself into history. If you like this story, please subscribe to support this channel.